Hi guys, Fred here from InDesign Tips and Tricks. Today I want to talk about moving multiple objects around within your InDesign page. We're going to look at techniques on how to pick them up, how to move them around, and we're going to utilize a feature which Adobe call hide. But I like to call it ghost mode. Sorry about that, couldn't resist. So it's probably worth mentioning before we start this video that I'll be using some tools in this top toolbar here. If you don't see that when you load InDesign, just come up to Window here and then down to Control. So if I tick that off, my tools have now disappeared. So we basically want Control checked there, and that'll bring up the tools for later on. Also worth noting, and this helps with layout in general, is if you come up to View, come down to Grids and Guides, and we just want to make sure that the Snap to Guides is on. And I like to have Smart Guides on as well. They give you visual references as you're working. Another thing that's worth mentioning, and we're moving things around, when we select multiple items, I'm not clicking the target on the images to move things, because that will select the image within the container, like so. So we don't want that. So whenever we move things around, either grab a text box or grab your image but outside of the target mode, and then that will pick up the picture to move it. This is a seminar program loosely based on work that we do for an actual client, and we get given information and profile pictures and text and times and things to put into the seminars themselves. Now we always follow the same structure so that the brochures look consistent, and once we've filled in all the information, we can see that normally we have a main speaker here to start the morning session, and then we have a panel towards the end of the morning with a chairperson, and then in the afternoon it generally follows the same format where there's a single speaker and then there's a panel session. But in this instance we've noticed that the second part of the afternoon is actually got an earlier time. So ideally the panel session here needs to sit where the single speaker is at the top and be swapped. So there's a couple of ways to do this. We can click and drag across all of our content. So we've now got that selected. And to make life easier, we could Command G to group all those together. We could then click and hold using Shift to bring all those up to the top. So this is all now sat over the top, and it's going to be very hard to get the single speaker content below. So we could Command X this. What that's done is cut that section out, but it's on the pasteboard ready to paste in. Then we could click and drag over the top of the single speaker, click, hold, and also hold Shift and drag down to roughly where we think the single speaker might want to sit. And then we can do Command, Option, Shift and V, and that pastes what we have on the pasteboard back into that top section. So we've now got the times follow the correct order, and the single speaker is now at the end of the afternoon below the beginning of the afternoon. And we're happy with that, that all looks okay. But there's a faster way to do it. So if I just undo what I did there by pressing Command Z a couple of times until we get back to where we were. So this time I'm going to click and drag out to select all my content. I'm not going to bother grouping these because I don't need to. I'm going to click and hold here on one of the objects. InDesign is struggling to preview that in a minute, but don't worry. Bring them up. This is now even more of a nightmare to try and collect all the content for the single speaker to bring her section down to the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into ghost mode, and I'm going to hide the section I just moved by pressing Command and 3. So this hasn't been cut and it hasn't been copied, it's just been hidden. And this is a feature that's been brought across from Illustrator several years ago and into InDesign, and it's really sped up my workflow. So we know that section now is safe, it's just hidden. So we can click and drag over the late afternoon speaker here. Same principle, click and hold the mouse, hold shift and drag her down. I think before we were roughly in line with Jess Blogs over here. And then to bring our content back that we moved up to the top here, we can hold Command, Option and press 3 again. And there they are. If we weren't happy with where we had the single speaker, we're now free to move her around if we wanted to give her a bit more air in between this section here and there. But I think I quite liked it in line with the profile pictures here, so that we had a nice straight line running through this document. So we'll undo that. And if we hold shift and click Jess Blogs, we can see that we're slightly out here. So there's two options to deal with that. We can unselect Jess. So we've just got back to having this section selected, and maybe nudge up one with the up arrow. Go back and click on Jess. And that is now nicely in line. Let's Command Z that and have a look at a more efficient way of doing it. Let's make this more obvious actually. We click on Jess, we can see that we're quite a way out. We've got this guide here and we're quite a way out with Joe to lining up with Jess. So what we can do, we will group that section this time. Holding shift, we'll deselect Jess. Then we will Command G to group this together. We can go back and hold shift to select Jess again. So this section is grouped and Jess is just selected with them. She's not part of that group. And then up here, we've got these really cool align tools. And if we click this bottom left one, align the top edges, that has pushed all of Joe Blogs' content up with Jess Blogs. And that is a much quicker way of doing it. Now, if we want to, we can go back to Joe Blogs' section and we can ungroup her by doing Command, Shift and G. And then we're free to work on those elements later on if we want to. So let's look at another example that might help us with the ghost mode. And I use this a lot. Let's say the client has come back to us once we've presented this to them and said, actually, can you swap Jess with John? Jess is actually a little bit more important. We can click and drag over Jess's content. Then we can click and hold with the mouse and then hold shift. And we can actually bring Jess over to the point where she completely sits over John. So we know then, because we've spaced all this already, that she is going to be evenly spaced with the other two speakers. So same principle, Command 3. That has now hidden her. And what we can do now is click and drag and select all of John's content. Click and hold him and hold shift. And we start to get these smart guides that InDesign shows us. So it gives us an indication that when spacing is matching elsewhere. Hold Command, Option and press 3. And Jess comes back in. John actually, for whatever reason, wasn't quite right there, so we'll just pick him up and bring him along a little bit. And there we go. We've swapped those two people using Ghost Mode. So hopefully that's given you some insight into easier ways to work with moving objects around on your page. If you've enjoyed this video and you feel like it's helped you out, I'd love it if you give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel and stick around for more future videos that we put out. Have a good day, guys. See you on the next one.